Hello everyone, I'm Naveen Agarwal and I want to invite all of you to watch this video recording of an interactive Q&A session we just finished. And in this session, we talked about a topic that should be of interest to everyone who is involved with risk management of medical devices. We talked about the latest development in harmonization of ISO 14971-2019 in Europe. And as we know, IMDRF has very explicit requirements for general safety and performance. And there are a lot of questions about harmonization of this standard in Europe against IMDRF. So the latest development is that the draft of ZA and ZAB Annexes, that's the process by which harmonization occurs, is now being voted on. So a decision could come very soon and we will know how they expect us to follow 14971 in order to meet the requirements of IMDRF or where there might be some gaps. So we talked about these questions and topics. Some questions, some unknowns, and we shared best practices and our thoughts. And we do this every month in our interactive Q&A sessions. For those of you who may not be familiar with this, they are free to join and you can join us anytime. We meet once a month and these are industry colleagues with years of experience in this area. We just get together and have a very informal and casual conversation because the intent is to engage with each other and share these thoughts in a very open way. So you're welcome to join us. And you'll be able to do that free if you join our knowledge sharing forum, which is also free to join. So you'll find this information on our Achieve website. And we invite you to join and take part in these discussions, whether you attend one of these meetings or you discuss that during our discussions on our forum. So it's open to all. Please take a moment and let us know what your thoughts and questions are. And we look forward to seeing you in one of these sessions.
There's a lot of countries moving to the IMDRF codes, including the US. I think you're going to see a shift across the world into using IMDRF codes for vigilance reporting and everything else. So the MedDRA is okay, but IMDRF is where the regulators are going. And I got that from my reps. The presentation this week that I was in with Kim Troutman, and Kim talked about the IMDRF codes.
So is there like an overlap? Is there an overlap between IMDRF and MedDRA or no?
That was what I was going to say. When I was trained a long time ago in MedDRA codes, it looked a little bit different. But now if you pull up the file which they have, the IMDRF file, they actually, I don't want to say it's one-to-one overlap, but whatever IMDRF codes are, they have a corresponding MedDRA code in that file. So they want to show that there's, some tie back there.
Okay.
Yeah. But the FDA has transitioned to IMDRF and the FDA's MDR reporting, medical device reporting process.
So Ed, are you saying that the FDA codes are also now aligned with IMDRF codes?
Yep. That's where they're, now I won't say it's complete, but that's the process they're going to. They have adopted the IMDRF.
Okay, so the way of the future, at least in the near term, is IMDRF. And hopefully IMDRF will align itself with MedDRA, because I've seen the research papers that I have read from FDA and other places, they do structured queries using MedDRA codes.
Yeah.
So if they are analyzing real world data using MedDRA codes, I'm hoping that there will be an alignment of all these codes and everyone will kind of, use the same thing.
The reason for why they are trying to do that, and in the latest versions, there's some alignment, is that when you talk about complaints, IMDRF suits that one-to-one. But now IMDRF wants you to take in clinical evidence, which includes creating registries and all that stuff, right? The process there is not the complaints process, but it goes to the claims process and everything. So for that, MedDRA is the standard. So that's why there needs to be that talk back and forth between the two codes.
That's a good point. That's a good
Yeah.
point. So I mean, I always felt like MedDRA was like growing and, you know, becoming a standard. IMDRF is probably trying to keep up with it and realizing that, hey, this is the way to standardize across the world, because, you know, other people in the world are also using MedDRA. It's a global regulatory database. And I saw examples of FDA research papers or white papers being published. In fact, in the clinical trials for vaccines, I read those reports. They pull data, structured query data using MedDRA codes for vaccines. So if they're doing that, it sounds like they use that as a standardized method. So I'm really pleased to see this alignment. And I know industry will probably respond because reporting will force them to start using these codes. And in the meantime, we will live with like worksheets that map one code with another. Like we'll have a mess in a worksheet. And I've seen that.
One of the
but that's the
things
way to do it.
one of the things you're supposing is that CBER and CDER and CDRH will all work together. And no,
they don't.
that doesn't happen. So
They
what
don't.
CBER is doing is not what CDRH is going to be doing. And CDRH is going to be doing what the IMDRF does, because that's devices in the world. So it's kind of a hodgepodge.
It is. Now, I heard that CDRH also is utilizing a lot of real world data, real world evidence to make pre-market,
Yes.
post-market decisions, right? How
Yes.
are they going? Do you know how they are going about doing that?
No, I don't. I unfortunately, I don't know
Well,
that
they
part of it.
published, my understanding is very limited to ads. So it's not much information. I read a very big paper that they posted, which had over 100 examples of using decisions based on real world data. And my understanding was that really they are using it to decide what they want pre-market versus post-market, what they will accept pre-market and post. That's the pure regulatory decision I felt by reading that. And there were many examples. Interesting. So they will actually accept some real world data or real world evidence analysis in lieu of clinical data that you have to generate on your own. But it should be done, you know, have a consultation with them, make sure it's scientifically valid, it's not biased, and all those nice things. But they give examples. So I guess they are trying to promote this.
Yes,
So,
they're definitely on the real world data. There's no doubt about it.
okay, Ed. So I don't know who else will join, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
How do I give you the? You should have something called share your screen. Why don't you do that just now?
Yeah. Okay. Let me introduce this before I share the screen.
Okay.
First of all, last Friday on LinkedIn, the BSI Compliance Navigator published the following. They have released BSEN ISO 13485 2016 A11 2021. What that is it's an amended version of the European version of 1345. The amendment contains Annex ZA and ZB. ZA and ZB are the harmonization paragraphs for ZA MDR, ZB IVDR. Now, until it's published in the official journal, it won't be the harmonized version, but that is what will be the harmonized version. And what has been out there is that the official journal is only going to publish the harmonized list twice a year. So that means we've got standards sitting out there which are ready to go, but they're not going to publish a list in the official journal until probably the end of the year. Okay.
So Ed, one thing though, one quick question.
Yes.
Is this BSI's recommendation or is it like a collective?
Okay, good question.
The
European Standards Organization, CEN and CENELEC, both develop European standards. They do not publish them. Okay, they turn them over to organizations like British standards, and DIN, and there's one that you need to know about, the Estonian Standards Organization, and I don't know what the abbreviation for that is. But I've been told that if you want to buy a standard, you go to the Estonian Standards Organization because it's cheaper there than it is anywhere else. Okay, so this is the European version. Okay, just because it has a BS on the front means that it's published by British standards, but there's no deviations in Britain for it. So that is the final version of the proposed harmonized version of 13485. Okay, now here's this slide. This is the harmonization status as of Monday for 14971, because when I saw the 1345 on Friday, I sent an email to our convener of the 14971 committee, who is the convener of CENELEC JTC3. That's the technical committee for CEN and CENELEC, the joint technical committee, just like in ISO, we're a joint technical committee between IEC and ISO, because the standard is logoed by both organizations. Okay, it's a jointly developed standard by ISO and IEC, and in Europe by CEN and CENELEC. So they, the technical committee, discussed the ZA and ZB with the European Commission, and the back and forth were submitted to the European Commission for approval, and they have accepted all of the submissions. So the step they're at right now is finishing the draft of the standard for the EU MDR and IVDR and submitting it for vote by the national committees of CEN and CENELEC, because that's the process you have to go through for standards. When you do an amendment, like in this case, it has to go out to all the national committees for them to accept that. Okay, so it is being circulated, and Chad, I don't know if you've got somebody in Europe that maybe could watch out for the European version and get it to you, but it's being circulated as, let's see, it will be PREN ISO 14971 2019 colon A11 2021. That's the code that will be on there. So that will be the European version. And if it is accepted, then it will be submitted to be published in the official journal and become a harmonized standard. So the only step left is to get acceptance by the national bodies. So if you have somebody out there that has a European membership in national standards bodies, you should be able to get it. Okay, so
do you expect any major changes with respect to what ISO 14971?
There will be no changes to the requirements in the standard. Clauses 1 through 10 will remain exactly the same as they are now. The only change will be the addition of Annex ZA and ZB. And Annex ZA and CB will have correspondence tables in them, which tell you it goes through all of the GSPR and clause by clause, it tells you whether it's covered or not covered in the standard. Okay, if it's not covered, then it's up to you as a manufacturer to figure out how to address that issue. If it is covered, then you follow the standard exactly.
So does it mean that EU MDR may have requirements which are not covered in the standard?
Yes.
Got it. Wow,
it's a
this
possibility.
is significant.
It's a possibility, but one of the things that was in the original draft was the clause was covered, but it was not covered for the product being developed. So in other words, the procedure covered it, but the implementation of that procedure left some possibilities that if you didn't follow it correctly, you could end up with a product that didn't meet the requirements.
Wow, this is significant.
It is very significant.
So looks like it is coming our way very quickly. I mean, it could be, if it's published by the end of the year or early next year, then that's it. Then we have to make sure we comply with it.
And the Joint Technical Committee in Europe is expecting it. They're being cautiously optimistic that it will be published in 2021.
And
now,
Ed, when it's published, then it becomes available to the general public?
Yeah, you can buy it then.
Okay.
And you can buy it from BSI or DIN or Estonia or whoever the standards publishing organizations are in Europe.
But the draft that BSI has published is not available for public, or can it be?
No, it is. And
Okay.
that's for 1345. And it's not a draft.
Okay.
It's not a draft, it's a final standard.
Okay, but not for 14971. That's step number 2 here.
14971 is not there yet.
Okay. So 13485. But there is a lot of overlap between 13485 requirements and how you use 14971 to meet those, right? There's a lot of overlap. Yes. So do they mention anything in that, those ZA?
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
I think it'll be worth getting it.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to get it inexpensively, or maybe free.
Well, that's a key word. Ed, thank you so much. Do you have other slides on this?
This is the only slide I have. This is what I was allowed to publish. The correspondence table that was drafted and was in, if you have access to the FDIS, the final draft of 14971 that was published in July of 2019, which of course I have. The correspondence tables that were drafted, and of course are not the final version that were submitted, but give you an example. And there's no content deviation. That's the important thing. What was in 2012 that caused all the problems was the content deviations. Those are gone. They will not exist. The only thing there will be is a correspondence table. The way it states is the clauses, subclauses of this standard. So clauses 1 through 10 are the requirements of 14971. So clauses 1 through 10 address the general safety and performance requirement, but it says not directly covered. EN ISO 14971 provides a process to generate the information that is the necessary step for the manufacturer to demonstrate the device is in conformity with GSPR number 1. 14971 does not provide requirements on design and manufacture. So the design and requirements that are in Annex 2, Chapter 2 of Annex 1 are not directly addressed in the standard. Oh, yeah? Because we don't talk about production and design directly.
Right, but it should be included through traceability, right?
Yeah.
So it is implied, and I think that they're recognizing that the process allows you to generate the information, but not directly.
Yeah, and that's why it says not directly covered. Okay, so that's what the way this is laid out. It's in a table, and it goes GSPR by GSPR 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and provides a statement on each one of those, so you would know exactly what to do for that.
Very helpful if, according to a GSPR, there's a corresponding guidance there of what to do through the 14971 lens. I think manufacturers will find that extremely valuable.
Oh yeah, it's very helpful. The GSPR safety and performance requirements 3 first paragraph, clause 4.1 of the standard covers that.
Mm-hmm.
Clause 3, second paragraph of the GSPR, clauses 4.1 and 4.2 cover that. So you've got a direct correlation between the clause of the standard and the clauses of the GSPR. And it goes all the way through clause 9, I think is the last one. Yeah, clause 9. And then there's some notes at the end about presumption of conformity stays valid only as long as the reference is maintained, and all those kinds of ifs, ands, or buts. And ISO 14979 can also be used to support the following parts of conformity assessment procedures in Annexes 9, 10, and 11 of the regulation concerning medical devices. And it says an adequate description of the results of the risk analysis in the risk management file, and undertaking by the manufacturer to institute and keep up to date a systematic procedure to review experience gained from devices in the post-market phase. So there you are.
There it is.
Yeah. It's covered.
I'm very happy
there.
to hear that. Very happy to hear that.
So that's what was proposed in July of 2019, and I know it's been revised, but
you don't know to what extent.
No.
Do you have a guess?
No. My convener didn't share it with me.
Okay.
So I can't guess until I've seen it.
Oh.
But I'm going to be making efforts to see that, and it will be when the draft standard is up for vote. So it will be PREN ISO 14971 blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever, A11 2021.
Yeah.
Now, Ed, as in terms of process, the people who participate in 14971 joint working group or committees, is anyone also involved in the JTC for Senelec?
Yes.
Okay, so there is some overlap.
But I have to be European. Okay, that's the
you don't qualify.
I don't qualify. Yeah. So it would be Germany and France and all those folks over there.
How's FDA taking all this, Ed? Where is FDA going? Because that's like
FDA is already done. They issued their statement and they say that 14971 2019 has been accepted on its scientific and technical merit.
But they don't require it. They don't require it.
Well, no, they don't require it. But if you claim compliance to 14971, you can claim compliance to 2007 up until December 25th, and I don't know why they picked that date, next year.
Okay.
2022. And on that date in 2022, you have to claim compliance to 2019.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's their transition period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And transition periods are established by regulators, not by ISO. ISO generally says we recommend 3 years transition on a standard, but they can't require it. It's the regulators that require the transition period. And that's what the FDA statement is on their recognized standards database. You can find it there.
So Ed, going back to what you described, really a lot of things are happening in Europe, and 14971, whatever that harmonized version, we are expecting that to, just go on maybe late this year or early next year, like become official. How do you think this will be received by the industry? What do you think they would, what their questions would be, or what their concerns would be in terms of timing or requirements? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I see a great movement in industry right now to the 2019 version. Mm-hmm. I get a lot of questions and a lot of opportunities to help people transition to it. So I think industry's already begun the transition. The problem will be where it's not covered in the standard where the MDR or IVDR is not covered. Now, what additional work do we have to do in our risk management system? And I use the word system on purpose because the MDR requires that you have a risk management system.
Yes.
Okay. So what we did in the 2019 is we changed the title of Clause 4 to Risk Management System. There's general requirements for a risk management system.
Yes.
And that's basically the major part of it, is to use that word system, because we were already describing a system.
Yes.
We talked about the process, the management responsibility. We talked about the risk management plan. We talked about the risk management file. All those things were part of the total risk management system. So all we did was change the title to say, this is what a system is.
Yes.
Okay. So that helped fulfill the European requirement to meet that statement in the MDR and IVDR.
Great. So what I'm hearing you say is that the industry is kind of mentally prepared already. They are starting to make some steps in that direction, and they are fully expecting this to be the expectation in the future, requirement in the future. How much of what is your opinion about how much of a lift they think they will have to take in order to go from where they are to future state? And again, it depends on the size of the company and type of products. But what's your general impression? Is it going to be like a huge deal for them, or hey, we are already doing some of it?
I think Jayat may be the person in a good position to answer that. But from my perspective as a standards author, the big thing I see is in the post-market end.
Yes.
Clause 10 of the standard is quite a bit different than
Yes.
Clause 9 in the 2007 was.
Yes.
So that's going to be where the heavy lift takes place. Would you agree, Jayat?
Absolutely. And its connection with other EU MDR deliverables, such as clinical evaluation report, post-market surveillance update report, and how the risk, especially the post-production risk data, flows through your post-market and clinical system, and also PMCF plans. So there has to be total alignment between all of these things. Yes, that one. I was gonna say that. You read my mind.
Yes, I did. This is my virtual background.
Yeah,
gets in the way.
2040. Yep. No, I see it. 2416.
20416 2020.
Yeah.
This is a guidance document, but probably the most important thing that I saw early on that does this is the diagram that ties together 14971 and 1345, specifically in Clause 10 of 14971 and Clause 8 of 1345, which are the two areas that address directly the collection of information, the review or analysis of information, and then the action you need to take as a result of the information you have collected. And what we say in 14971 and also what 13485 says is your collection of information needs to be active, not proactive, not reactive.
Yes.
So you can't wait for the phone to ring with a complaint. You have to be out searching information, and that's where Jayat's work is right now, is figuring out that process to do that.
So what I feel about this is by emphasizing this part of the risk management system, I think that this is a very easy or better way of evaluating effectiveness of the whole thing. Like, how effectively are you managing risk across the board? How responsive you are to what you are learning from the market, right? And how do you go and connect all your improvement activities using a risk-based? I think it'll be easy for people to see if they are doing some kind of an audit or inspection. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's a requirement of 14971 that you do that review of the process to make sure the process is functioning well. It's also a requirement of 1345 in management review that you have functioning processes that are working. So the review step that's in Clause 10 of 14971 would be input to management review address the suitability of the risk management process. Is it working or not? So this whole thing all ties together.
Right.
That's actually a great point, and that's why identifying the right metrics for your processes, suitability and effectiveness is very important.
Yes.
And these metrics really have to be intelligent, that they, using the product data, they can speak to the process's effectiveness. In
Correct.
at least that's how I'm looking at.
Yes, you are correct. Yeah, that's what we expect.
Point. Yeah. Because I think very often, here's a challenge with people I feel people are going to find, is that post-market data is not clean. It takes a lot of effort to figure out what is going on. And if you have metrics that are actually in a way not effective, not working for you, you're going to find yourself, and I know, Jed, you are an expert in that area, so I would love to hear your views on that. I feel the data is not clean, and I feel we insist on methodologies that are not effective. And as a result, my personal impression is that it's not working very well. What are the kind of challenges people are going to face in developing right methods, right? First of all, get the right data, which is itself difficult. But if you don't have it, what can you do to find the true signals? What can you do to act quickly? I would love to hear your views on that, Jed. I know you're an expert in that area.
Yeah, thank you, Naveen. I think that's a very, very valid point, because at the moment, the expectation from IMDRF is that they are really basing everything on assumption that your post-market data is going to be squeaky clean. But the reality is, I'm not even kidding. NBs are looking for this. They're looking for that connection, and the assumption is that it's squeaky clean. But the reality is that there's lots of variability, lots of gray areas in that.
Yes.
And step one to figuring out what to do there is, just like when you take any meditation course, the first step they teach you is awareness. So step one is that you need to be aware where you are lacking.
Yeah.
And then you need to create systems around it. And I'll give an example. And the system should drive data collection. An example was, and one of my colleagues told me this, is that there was a company who were having a lot of difficulties collecting data around harms. And when they moved to 2091, they wanted to start getting severity of harms from their complaints data. But you have intake people who are not trained in all of that, who did not understand all of those things. So what they did was they changed their system such that there were easy drop downs for harms and for severities. So they knew that these were required fields, so they had to go and get that information. And in case and now it's not gonna, let's say it's not gonna give you 100%, but they went from like 10% to 70%. So, and then a lot of fell into the other and not available category and all that stuff as well. But that was one improvement. As you go through this cycle, you'll understand you can polish your systems even more. For example, the issue they ran into was they listed out all harms, they listed out all severities, but then they started seeing a lot of other being chosen. And then, risk management team said, oh, complaints team doesn't know how to get all this information, all of that stuff. But then somebody got sat down with the intake people and they tried to investigate what was going on. And the issue was that a lot of times a complaint would come in with no harm. There would be no issue, but there was no harm field not provided.
No harm, right? not indicated,
So once they updated that, then they realized, oh, this is a great thing, because if a complaint has no harm, that actually positively favors the benefit risk analysis. So it's not all dark territory, right? If we are aware of what our gaps, have a continuous improvement mindset, and work through the system, it's possible to get what we want out of it. But if nothing, any company at the moment has to track the harms, the type of harms, and the severities coming out from the complaint data through their system. That's step 0 of IMDRF at the moment.
Awesome. Well said. Well said. Thank you for sharing that. What I picked up on this is a mindset of continuous improvement. That is not a regulatory requirement, but it's an expectation. You will not be able to succeed. Well, Ed is going to differ with me, I know.
Well, where I'm going to go there is if you look at 13485 in clause 8, monitoring and feedback section has incorporated continuous improvement. Now, they don't use those words,
right?
But that's the process they're talking about, which is the feedback through management review and updating the quality system when it's not effective. And
Yes.
what Jay was talking about was an area where part of the quality system was not effective.
Correct.
And they made changes
And you
and
fixed
improvements. So
No,
it's
I totally hear you.
it's just not using the right words.
I totally understand. I think where I was going with that comment, Ed, was for far too long, I think, and I'm being very honest with everybody here, we have always made our decisions based on whether something is written in black and white as a requirement or not. We are all about compliance. And to an effect that this becomes a difficult thing for people to understand from a culture point of view, from a mindset point of view, which is what we have to go away from. We have to say, hey, this is a regulatory requirement. Better do continuous improvement. Otherwise, you will never get there. You will have chronic problems, right? So I think it's an expectation that people have avoided for a long time. And I'm like very honest with in this forum. That's my impression. I would love to hear if it is wrong or not. But if you have that, then you say, okay, what can I do? This is you gave great examples. Maybe the engineers, quality people should sit with the complaint intake department, bring that back into the design phase. Why won't we do that? And you will satisfy the requirement of closing the loop, life cycle risk management. So this, where I'm going with this is that this needs to hit the organizational culture and the way we do business. That's where I was getting.
Yeah, no, great point. One comment I'll make is that the way EU MDR turned the compliance-driven system on its head is that at the end of the day, you can sit and you can maybe show that I satisfy all these requirements and this is what I've got for my files. That's not going to fly because they are going to judge you based on your benefit risk. That's where everything filters down.
Yes.
Product safety. So in the past, somebody could say, oh, I'm compliant with requirement 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All good, right? EU MDR is different. It's driving it in the opposite direction. That's why it's slightly.
So I think to me that should make people more nervous than trying to create like a system of compliance. It should make people more nervous because changing the culture is more difficult.
Right.
Absolutely, very difficult.
I was just when you said system of compliance, Naveen, it actually to me it sounds like the requirement now is system of effectiveness.
Yes.
To show that it's effective in showing your benefits outweigh the risk. And just one more thing to add, I think, Chad, the example that you gave with the complaints is a real world issue, right? These complaints, depending on the country that they come from, have little, sometimes they have good information, right? But in many cases, they don't. We need to do a better job at linking clinical literature data with the risk management system, right? Now, here is the issue. It's somewhat opposite to what you described in your complaint system. In clinical literature, we have adverse events. It's a buffet of adverse events with percentage of rates of occurrence for that specific cohort of clinical study, right? But there is no information on the back end in the sense of what were the hazards and the hazardous situations that caused the adverse events. So now I'm staring at a list of 50 to 60 adverse events in some cases of clinical studies. And I'm scratching my head on where do I draw the line for reasonably foreseeable to try to connect those tons of adverse events into my risk management HA hazard analysis, where I have to now fill in the gaps of hazardous situation, P1, P2, all of those things. And it's not easy because compliance requires me to just get all those adverse events in my HA. But I'm wondering, is that really effective if I just copy and paste those and make some hazards and hazardous situations up?
Good point. Great point. Can I share something with you, Ronak, on that part? Yep. Is working with doctors for more than 2-3 years now, what I have realized is there is a need to build a mapping, because most people describe adverse events in any term that comes to their mind. So they may be referring to something similar that can be described by a standardized term in different ways. You with me so far? So there is a need to map all these commonly used terms for harms or adverse events to one or two or 3 at most standardized terms. That is why this MedDRA, that's why this IMDRF standardization is effective, because you don't have to put every single term in your hazard analysis. You have to put a standard term that may map to 10 other terms, right? So that's one simplification, and it requires medical knowledge. You cannot do that without medical knowledge. So you need to build that map right away. Second thing that I picked up upon your conversation was, and I know Ed is probably going to add to that for sure, and I would love that. You are not required to do P1, P2. There is no mandatory requirement to do P1, right. P2. Don't make your life complicated. There's many other simpler ways of handling probability of harm. P1, P2 lands you into a lot of trouble if you don't have good quality data and good relationship between failure modes, false, hazardous situations through sequence of events. And even when there is no sequence, no fault or failure, that requires a lot of, it's a different game. Not worth investing in that unless you feel is going to tremendously reduce your risk and improve your engineering. It's not mandatory. People got confused for a long time, Ed. Is that not true? Like, I think they had a misunderstanding.
Well, the whole thing started when we were trying to explain to people that the probability of a fault occurring was different from the probability of harm occurring. And how do we explain that?
Yes.
So that whole annex, Amos, that's enough.
He's incensed at P1 and P2.
Right. Yes. He doesn't like P1, P2.
But what that was just an explanation in an informative annex, which was intended to explain why it's different from a probability of hazard occurring to the probability of harm. So we were trying to lay that out and not requiring anybody to do anything because it was in an informative section of the standard.
And reality is that everybody has got on that train now.
Everybody has gone on that train.
Well, now, if you go into, I think it's clause 5 of 24971, it breaks down P1 into PA, PB, PC, PD, PE, and so on. So it's broken it even further down.
But even with that clarification, Ed, you cannot believe how many times I get asked by people about P1, P2, and I keep repeating myself. So Ronak, we don't want to make you feel bad, okay? And don't get concerned. If it's a good method, if you have the right kind of data and the expertise to create the right relationship, but it's not a requirement. So I would encourage you to take a look and say, are you doing something more than what you should based on, the kind of information you have? Could you be more effective? So don't run into changing things that you're doing. I know it's a very difficult thing, but I hope it clarifies it's not required.
We address it in clause 5 of 24971 by saying that you want to use qualitative data up until the point that you have confidence in the numerical data to change over to a quantitative system. And that's where EU MDR gets you in trouble because they want everything quantitative. And you can point to the fact that, hey, this data is only 50% confident. I can't use that level of confidence reliably to come up with an outcome. So we want you to use a qualitative system all the way through your risk management process until you can confirm the data you have has a high enough confidence level to shift over to a quantitative system. So that's another thing where the standard is different from what they're requiring in Europe. And the FDA also, if you read their 4 or 5 guidances on benefit risk, all of their examples are qualitative. There's not one quantitative example in the benefit to risk guidance. The FDA, and I had a discussion with one of the FDA people this week about the fact that EU MDR is causing them a great deal of trouble because they have always insisted on use of quantitative first until you have that confidence. And so all of the FDA analysis and everything is based upon qualitative up until they can get that. And because you've got so many disparate aspects of both benefit and risk, you can't come up with one number, which is what the benefit to risk ratio thing in the MDR tries to tell you. You can't do that because, and I used the example the other day of going into the doctor's office, and the doctor says, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain? Well, today, the level of pain is a 6. Right. Tomorrow, I might think that same level of pain is a 10.
Right.
Well, that's not repeatable. And if you go back to the quality engineering background that I have.
So if that's the case, Ed, if that's the case, I'm expecting a lot of heartburn when EU MDR comes out and saying we want everything quantitative. And my fear is that people will, to satisfy that requirement, my fear is people will actually adopt wrong quantitative methods just to show.
Yes.
That's terrible. So how do you think that's going to work?
So I want to. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to address something which Ron had brought up in terms of the literature adverse events, because coming from Postmarket, I completely commiserate with that situation because it's a bad situation when somebody does a literature search and you suddenly have like 50 or 60 adverse events and you don't know where to place it. So, however, in the EU MDR paradigm, we will have to find a place for that, and it has to feed back into your risk documents. A way to do that is that if you are unable, if it's a specific enough harm, as post-market experts on your product, you will be most likely able to fit it into a hazardous situation or a hazard about 5 to 10% of the times, not a lot of times. The rest, 90% of the times, when you are unable to find any sequence of events which can lead to something like that, you will have to put in a line item which says it is not related to malfunction, but it might be an ineffective outcome of the device. But it has to be a line in the risk file.
It has to be, yes. But I think that's why mapping it to standard terms is useful, because you could map 5 or 10 of these, generic terms to one standard term, and then you add only one line, not 5 lines.
Agreed. And that's what we do. So we have, I think most companies do now, have a master harms list.
Yes.
Where you have some of these harms are bucketed into one specific grouping. And Jed, to your point, you're right. If it's not easily identifiable to the device malfunction or failure mode specifically, we look at procedural, right? Because sometimes it's just it's the nature of for us, it's mostly endoscopic procedures. Mm-hmm. For an endoscopic procedure, you got to have a needle pin prick. You got to get access. There is going to be blood. There are going to be some of you may call it side effects, but that's a whole different topic I don't want to get into.
No.
But that's the procedural nature of the clinical application. And in other cases where we just can't fit it in the device or the procedure bucket, we do what you suggested, like make a note of it and say the data does not lend itself at this moment to allocate it into a certain grouping.
Guys, thank you again. This was excellent discussion. Ed, thanks for bringing this up. I just have one last kind of announcement to share with you guys. I am moving the knowledge sharing forum to a different platform. You might have received an email already from me. If not, please check it. The reason being is that the new platform is a lot more suitable for engagement, better engagement. So take a look at that. Please sign up. Already many people have signed up. Because what I have decided to do is basically focus on educational and outreach activities under a separate brand, which I call Achieve. Might have seen that, away from my kind of consulting brand, so I don't want to confuse the issue, and have people really focused on training and educational opportunities and outreach and collaboration on Achieve. So hopefully you have received the email. I'm sure you are included in that list. So take a look. But I'm over time going to phase out the platform I was using for the discussion forum. So that's all. Anything from you guys, Jed, Ronak, any other feedback? What else can we do to improve our engagement?
No, I think this is a great platform. I think Ed gave us some very important nuggets of knowledge.
Yes.
I'm very satisfied with these meetings, to be
Yes,
honest.
yes. And hopefully with this online knowledge sharing forum, we can continue
Yep.
the conversation.
Agreed.
So I would really urge you to participate and, drop a few comments here and there. And in the beginning, I think we may have to drive a little bit, just through example, maybe we'll have to drive that behavior among the broader group. So if you don't mind just, sharing a few thoughts or questions or even links to information. I know, Jed, you have a lot of those. So I have created like a useful resources section. Feel free to just go in and, post stuff there, post questions, comments. I think in the first 3 or 4 months, we will need some help from each other to drive that. Otherwise, it's not going to work very well. So just take a look.
Oh, definitely. Will do.
Okay, guys, with that, I'll let you go and, have a good one. We'll be in touch.